Hello and welcome. This is Fireworks. The November 16, 2019 governorship elections. Hello and welcome. This is Fireworks. The November 16, 2019 elections in Kogi State remain very much on our minds. The elections were at best warlike, with many reports of different shades of electoral violence. What are the lessons learned? And more importantly, what are those reforms germane to the transformation of Nigeria's electoral process? I'll put forward these questions today, this time to the electoral umpire. Welcome once again to your preferred Hard Talk interview program. Let's take a moment. Thank you for staying tuned to Fireworks. My guest today is the INEC National Commissioner in charge of Information and Voter Education, Mr. Festus Okoye. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with the conditions in Kogi State ahead of the election. But first of all, I'd like to quote from your Electoral Act, Section 26, subsection 1, which states, where a date has been appointed for holding an election and there is reason to believe that there's a serious breach that is likely to occur if the election is proceeded with, or it is impossible to conduct that election as a result of natural disasters or emergencies, the Commission may postpone the election. Why wasn't this section invoked in the case of Kogi State?
As at the date before the election, there was no cogent and verifiable reason to postpone the election. The political parties carried out their campaigns. We knew that there were few challenges in some few areas, but those challenges were not enough. We are not cogent enough for us to postpone the Kogi governorship election.
A party candidate's office was razed by fire.
Yes.
You're aware?
Yes, I'm aware.
A governor in Lokoja was attacked days to the election at his hotel.
Yes.
These conditions were not sufficient for postponement. And even a day or 2 days to the election, Commissioner, at the venue of the Peace Accord, that candidate was yet again attacked. And indeed, the INEC National Chairman, Inspector General of Police, were tear-gassed inside that office. These conditions didn't signal extreme tension.
I was in Lokoja. I was at the venue of the stakeholders meeting. I was there when the chairman was delivering his address, and this thing occurred at the point the chairman was delivering his address. These skirmishes between some political party loyalists happened outside the gate of the place where we were holding the stakeholders meeting. Of course, you do not expect in an election for people not to campaign and campaign vigorously. But what we are saying is that as before the date of the election, the condition did not warrant a situation where we are going to suspend the election, because you are talking about a state with several local governments. It is not a state with just one local government. And this situation and these issues you are talking about happened in only one local government. So it will be incongruous and it will be insensitive for the Commission to postpone an election just on the basis of the fact that something is going on in one local government.
Yet in 2016, we didn't have these conditions in Edo State, but INEC quoted security threat as reported by security agents for the postponement of the governorship election in Edo State.
The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which is the fundamental law of the land, it says that we cannot conduct a governorship election 150 days before the date for the conclusion of the tenure of the governor, and not later than 30 days. The implication is that there is a window that is open within which the Commission must conduct an election. And the moment you go outside that particular window, you have a constitutional crisis. You have a situation that is not envisaged by the Constitution. And also familiar with what happened in Bayelsa State. In Rivers State, what the Commission did was to suspend the election. The Commission does not have the constitutional virus or constitutional mandate or constitutional power to cancel any election. But the Commission can suspend an election pending when conditions improve in terms of having a stable environment for the conduct of a particular election. But this condition for the issue of cancellation, you do not cancel an election.
Postponed in Edo State.
I'm coming. You do not cancel an election where results have been declared. because by our own constitutional matrix and legal matrix, each polling unit is sovereign. It is the presiding officer.
We'll talk about cancellation.
Yes.
We're talking about postponement.
Yes.
What's the difference between the conditions in Edo State in 2016 that warranted postponement of election by 2 weeks and the conditions in Kogi that didn't warrant same treatment?
But you have not convinced me. You need to also convince me that just because a party secretary was burnt and there was some skirmish at the venue of the stakeholders meeting, and the police said, oh, we had information that some political talks were amassing in a particular hotel and we went to go and check it out, that those conditions warrants us postponing an election where, one, all the presiding officers have been trained and all the assistant presiding officers have been trained. Two, where the ballot papers have been printed for this particular election and where the smart card readers used for the election have all been conditioned to the fact that an election is going to start at a particular date, and where all the collation officers have also been trained and deployed, and where the commission has also paid all the transporters that are going to conduct the election half of the monies that are demanding for. So the implication, what we are saying, is that because one party office was burnt and the police claimed that they went to a particular hotel to go and see whether political talks are there, and because some political talks did some drama in front of the stakeholders meeting, that we should burn the Nigerian people's money on the basis of that. No, I think that this commission is a people's trust, and
so those conditions were insignificant.
They were as at the date before the election and the build up to the election. They were not cogent and verifiable enough to affect the entire state, warranting the commission to postpone that particular election.
So what were the conditions, cogent and verifiable enough in Kogi, in Edo State in 2016,
yes,
that warranted a postponement of the election?
Now, I was not here during the Edo elections. I don't know the type of security information that was received by the chairman and national commissioners that warranted them to suspend the elections for that particular period. So I'm not going to speak in relation to that because I was not here. But in terms of
but I believe you were a Nigerian citizen,
yes,
at
I was
the time.
Yes, but
so you are aware of events ahead of Edo State election. Do you recall the same level of tension, yes, of violence ahead of the Edo State election in the same scale as what we witnessed in Kogi election?
You see, as an ordinary Nigerian citizen, then I don't have the type of information I have now in relation to the electoral process as at then. Now I receive security information, and I also process security information. I receive reports from resident electoral commissioners. I also receive the reports from the field. I receive reports from resident electoral commissioners that went as support recs in Bayelsa and in Kogi states. So the type of report and the type of information at my disposal, and how the commission comes to a decision whether to suspend an election or not, that I have now, I don't have it during that particular period.
Okay, I'll have to accept your explanation. Now, if you're not convinced about my argument about the state of things in Kogi State ahead of the election, the outcome of the election, does it now give INEC cause to rethink about why it should have considered a postponement of the election?
No, I don't.
The reports of violence, intimidation, harassment of voters?
Well, here we don't see into the future.
No. We have seen the Kogi election now.
I'm saying we don't see into the future. The mandate of this commission is to organize, undertake and supervise elections. And that's exactly what we do. The conduct of election is a multi-stakeholder venture. All the critical stakeholders in the electoral process must play their own role and must play their own part. A different agency has been saddled with the constitutional and legal responsibility of maintaining law and order. And we, under the auspices of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, at the national level, at the state level, and at the local government level, we were meeting and we were looking at security threat assessment in relation to this election. And the ones we harvested on our own, we made it available to the police. And the police also made available some security reports and some security information to us. But none of them indicated that the level of violence we had in some polling units was going to be on a scale that we witnessed. Yes, this commission acknowledges the fact that there was violence in some registration areas. There was violence in some polling units and so on and so forth. But if you look at our processes and procedures, the framers of our constitution and the framers of the law gave or have given the commission as a commission very limited discretionary power in terms of the management of elections. You will not see any paid INEC staff at the polling unit because it is Nigerians that conduct these elections. You have 4 ad hoc staff at the polling unit. The presiding officer is a corps member, a Nigerian, serving his nation or her nation. The 3 assistant presiding officers are either U corps members or students of federal tertiary institutions. So they are the ones that have been given the leeway, the power to manage elections in a particular polling unit. Ditto with our voting points. So, one, if there's an overvoting in a polling unit, it is the responsibility of the presiding officer to cancel the election at that particular polling unit.
Who is
a corps member?
A corps member.
Yes.
Why should the Constitution confer such powers on a vulnerable member of the society who is subject to the whims and caprices of politicians?
No. Now, it is not the Constitution or the law that says that the presiding officer must be a corps member or that the assistant presiding officer must be a student of a federal tertiary institution. It's part of our processes and procedures. This is because if you move the entire INEC staff, pay staff, all of them, the 16,200, including drivers, cleaners, messengers, the chairman, the resident electoral commissioners, the assistant, the administrative secretaries, and so on, and the electoral officers, all of them cannot conduct election in one state. So the implication is that we have to depend on other institutions and other agencies to provide ad hoc staff for us because we do not have the capacity and the wherewithal to harvest all these categories of staff. So the framers of the law and the commission itself also wanted to remove arbitrary discretionary power from the hands of resident electoral commissioners and from the hands of the commission, and to vest it with the presiding officer who sees what is going on at the polling unit. That is why, since the presiding officer is the one with the voters register and has been trained, the presiding officer looks at the voters register, looks at what the votes that have been cast, and makes a determination whether there has been overvoting. If there has been overvoting, the presiding officer cancels it and makes a report to the collation officer.
I'll ask that question again in a different way.
Yes.
If a returning officer who is a staff of a university, a vice chancellor or a pro-chancellor of the university, as the case may be,
yes,
can be made, according to reports, to declare results under duress.
Yes.
How can a corps member stand up for the commission in the face of threat?
Well, I must acknowledge that some of these corps members have performed heroically. Some of them have endured very harsh conditions. If you watch the television, you saw some of them in very inclement condition, paddling canoes in order for them to get to polling units. It's only patriotic Nigerians that can do this. You saw some of them resisting the threats by political talks. Only patriotic Nigerians can do this. And you saw some of them sleeping in very inclement conditions, sleeping in very awkward places because they want to serve this country. So they have performed well. And if given the opportunity, if allowed, without any form of interference, without intimidation, without any form of violence, they are going to do very well. But coming to the question you have asked, the collation officers that the commission uses are senior academic staff of federal tertiary institutions. Now, Section 68 of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended has given them the power to make a declaration and a return. And the Section 68 says that, and the courts have also affirmed that the decision of the returning officer on issues relating to what has been stated in Section 68 is final, and only a court of law can overturn such a decision. But from what has happened in the recent past, the Commission is rethinking the provisions of Section 68 and 75 of the Electoral Act, because we believe that if a returning officer has made a return under dubious circumstances, or has made a return because a gun has been put to his or her head, that the Commission should have the power and the right to review such a declaration and a return and make a determination whether that return was made voluntarily or not. So we are rethinking that particular provision.
In the case of Kogi,
yes,
bearing in mind the unprecedented level of violence reported in the elections, how does a declaration of result, particularly in the governorship election, how does it sit well on the conscience of the Commission?
Well,
why is the Commission helpless to cancel?
No, we are not helpless. We are a commission created by the Constitution and created by the law. The Constitution has completely delineated the areas of our powers and the limitations of our own powers. So the Constitution has not given us the power to cancel an election result. The Constitution has given, the law has given us the power to suspend an election and go back and reconduct that and continue with the process when conditions improve. But the power to cancel an election is completely outside our purview. When a declaration, when results are, the votes of candidates are sorted out at the polling units and counted and entered in the various forms, it is the presiding officer that makes that determination on what to do, and then it's escalated to the collation officer at the registration area, then to the collation officer at the local government level, and then to the states where you have the collation and returning officer. So these things are collated. Now, when the results are the incidents are entered in from EC40G, the collation officer now looks at all the reports and the number of registered voters in those places. If the number of registered voters that where results have been cancelled will make a difference in terms of who is declared as the winner, then we have to go back and conduct elections in those areas. But if it will not make any difference, the collation and returning officer will make that declaration and a return. And if we have made a mistake, or the returning officer has made a mistake, the law says that only a court of law can correct those mistakes. And if you look at some of the results from the various election petitions, there are some places where the courts have asked us, go and conduct a fresh election in 1 polling unit, conduct in 2 polling units, conduct in 3 polling units. In the case of Kogi West Senatorial District, the collation and returning officer did not make a return, did not return anybody as having been duly elected, because the number of votes from the areas
margin of win principle.
Yes, the margin of lead principle had to apply, and that's why we are going back to go and conduct election in those areas, in Kogi and in Ajokuta federal constituency.
All right, we'll now begin to look at the lessons learned and the reforms that can be applied in the future. You're watching Fireworks. My guest today is the INEC National Commissioner in charge of information and voter education. And it's been an enlightening first 20 minutes or so. Let's take a break. When we return, there'll be more interesting talking points. Stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned to Fireworks. If you've just joined us, my guest today is the INEC National Commissioner in charge of information and voter education, Mr. Festus Okoye. Before the break, we had a productive conversation where the Kogi election is concerned. The constraints of INEC particularly came up, and we learned about how the Electoral Act limits the powers of INEC, particularly to determine the outcome of an election, so that it checks the arbitrary use of powers. And we learned that at the particular, on election day, ad hoc staff rather than INEC staff conduct election and there are no INEC staff present. Have I presented it accurately?
Yes.
So now let's look at reforms. In the Kogi election, there were reports that even policemen at polling units ran for dear life where there were threats of violence. Understandably, at polling units, policemen are not allowed to carry arms.
Yes.
But there were over 30,000 security operatives deployed for the Kogi election. Yes. So there's reason to suggest that there are backups somewhere outside the polling units. Why didn't this make a difference?
Police officers and other security officers at the inner cordon of the polling unit are not supposed to be armed. And I think that there's wisdom in this because if one security personnel makes a mistake, it can lead to catastrophic consequences in a polling unit if the person is armed. So what we have suggested and what we have been implementing is a situation where we are going to have armed police officers at the outer cordon of the polling units, or some police officers patrolling a particular registration area, so that if there's a problem, within 5 minutes, they can respond to that particular issue and that particular problem. The implication is that those who are the inner cordon of the polling unit must also be in a position to have some level of synergy with those outside in terms of communication gadgets and so on, so that if they feel threatened or if they notice some breakdown of law and order, they can call them in. So it's part of the issues we are looking at. Why is it? How come that this type of synergy was lacking in some of the registration areas and some of the polling units where we had challenges, and why they couldn't intervene on time in order to restore law and order? So we are looking at how to recalibrate our polling units and how to also make for more effective policing and more effective synergy between the people at the inner cordon of the polling units and those at the outer cordon.
Now, at the interagency and consultation level,
yes,
are you also going to take into cognizance the fact that those who perpetrate electoral violence have sophisticated weapons? This means that they also have huge resources at their disposal. So will there be reforms in this regard as well, and what form will it take?
Well, I think that what the media should do is to also focus some attention on the activities of political parties and the activities of some of the candidates. Some of these political talks did not go to the polling units on their own. They either went there through the instigation of somebody or some parties, or they were there based on their own understanding of the fact that they need to protect a particular interest. So I think that we must also find ways and means of getting the political parties and the political elite to key in to the democratic agenda of the people of this country and have some democratic values and credentials that they believe in. The ordinary people of this country have accepted democracy and democratic processes as the best way to go. But I'm not too sure that those who are running the country through political parties and through other processes have also accepted democracy the way the other people have accepted democracy. And that is why we have a situation where through violence, through unwholesome democratic practices, they are completely trying to get the people to disengage from the electoral process, and I think that is not the right thing to do. One of the biggest worries in this commission now is that because of the level of electoral violence, we may, during the 2023 elections, find it very difficult to get core members that will volunteer to go and act as presiding officers. We are worried that parents may not even allow their sons and daughters who are in federal tertiary institutions to go and volunteer and be patriotic citizens for the conduct of this election. And I know that immediately after the incident in Nembe, just before the Bayelsa governorship elections, that half of the collation officers we recruited and trained from one federal tertiary institution withdrew from the process.
From participation.
Yes, and we had to go to
because of the fear of electoral violence.
Because of the fear of electoral violence. So we are getting to a situation, unless addressed, where we will find it very difficult to get Nigerians to go and volunteer and assist the commission to conduct elections.
That compels me to remain on the issue of resources for perpetrating electoral violence.
Yes.
Politicians use money, they need money to perpetrate electoral violence.
Yes.
But we can't talk enough about the content of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill that wasn't signed into law by the executive, it rather shores up the required funding for the prosecution of election. Yes. How does that worry the commission? Relating to the issue on the front burner.
My position is that if the political parties, if the candidates develop the democratic spirit that leaves everything within the confines of the law and also allows the Nigerian people to go and exercise their democratic franchise, knowing that it is an ordinary civic responsibility, that we will not have a problem. In some countries, people conduct elections with stones. In some countries, people conduct elections with ordinary A4 papers. But here, our ballot papers are printed to currency standard. And at each point, we keep on hiding from one country to the other because we don't want the political class to know where we are printing the ballot papers so that they don't go and clone them. There is something with the result sheets. Law and law reform alone will not guarantee good elections. What will guarantee good elections is an acceptance by the political elite that they must develop that democratic spirit and that they must have a change of attitude that allows them to leave the ordinary people of this country to go out to the polling units and go and cast their vote. The only thing law and law reform will do is to reinforce the attitudinal behavior of the Nigerian people who have accepted democracy and democratic processes. Let me give you an example with the issue of the smart card reader. In 2015, the smart card reader worked very well because the political parties and the candidates did not understand the place of the smart card reader in the electoral process. So they were afraid. But after 2 electoral cycles, they have now come to find out that they can bypass the smart card reader. They can violate the sanctity of the smart card reader. They have now come to realize that what is important is the voters register and the other forms, and that whatever happens to the smart card reader cannot be used as a measure of overvoting in any election, because they have studied the Supreme Court judgment very, very well, and they imbibe the lessons from that. So what we need to do is to be a step ahead of them by proposing creative and innovative methods of conducting elections.
Speaking of creative and innovative ways of conducting elections, the advocacy in the media spaces take the process out of the hands of politicians and introduce electronic voting. What are the limitations of INEC in leading the advocacy for this to be passed into law at the legislative level and for it to be signed at the executive level?
Look, our main function is to operate with whatever law exists, the extant laws at a particular time. The extant law as of today are 2. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended, which is the fundamental law of the land. The Electoral Act 2010 as amended, which is our guiding law that delineates our processes and procedures. And then our regulations and guidelines and manuals issued for the conduct of these elections. If tomorrow the Constitution is altered and the Electoral Act is amended, we will have no choice and we have no other alternative than to remain within the ambit of these laws. But let me just say this, that electronic voting will not solve all the electoral challenges of this country. 2, each country must arrive at electronic voting based on its own history, based on its own geography, based on the level of literacy in the country, and based on so many other variables, security variables involved. There are so many parts of this country that are not yet covered by any of the major networks. So in terms of in proposing electronic voting, we must also take those parts into consideration because it's almost over 40%. My own proposition is that what we must do is to find a creative way of having a duality of electronic voting and transmission of results, and also backing it up with the manual process, so that if one of them has problems, we can devolve to the other one. And we must also look at the whole issue about cybersecurity. As of today, this commission is not yet comfortable we are not yet sure that we have complete control of the cyberspace in terms of electronic voting and electronic transmission of election results. So, whatever reforms will be proposed must domicile the commencement date of electronic voting and electronic transmission with this commission, so that when the commission feels comfortable, when we have put all the variables, when we have done all the procurement, then we can introduce all these things gradually into the electoral process. And in introducing them, we must start with smaller elections. A by-election here, a by-election there, a state constituency election here, a federal constituency by-election here, and before we go to the national level.
When you say it will be conducted, first of all, based on tests,
yes,
at by-elections, smaller elections at different levels.
Yes.
But if we, bear in mind what electronic voting looks like, and electronic transmission of results, people are voting from the comfort of their homes. So where does the threat of violence come in? Where does threat of disruption come in?
So, with what are people going to vote from the comfort of their homes?
With their devices.
So, so a study has been done to show that of the over 84 million registered Nigerians, that all of them have devices in their homes, and that all the major networks cover all the nooks and crannies of this country. These are the things we need to look at.
But will Nigeria wait for those who have not caught up with development? Or shouldn't your voter education office be the one to lead the advocacy, for the campaign, the awareness, for them to be part of the process?
We can lead the awareness and the campaign, and then we have to also buy mobile phones for them.
Must you buy mobile phones for them?
Yes, because they are Nigerians, and they're also entitled to make a determination on how they are governed. So you want to punish them because of our own lack of good governance.
But even with the structure on ground, there are many who do not come out to exercise their franchise.
But you also be surprised that it is these people that do not have the mobile phones that vote in the elections. That's why sometimes you see the votes from the rural areas is so huge, and it is people who ordinarily we consider as not literate that determine how this country is governed. So why must we disenfranchise them because they don't have the mobile phone? Why must we disenfranchise them because the major networks have not established in their communities? Why must we disenfranchise them because they don't have money to buy mobile phones? Why must we disenfranchise them because there is no power, there's no electricity or power in their communities? Why must we do that?
Even with the updated voter registration nationwide,
yes,
that has about 60 million registered voters for Nigerians.
About 84.
84, sorry,
Yes.
Registered voters. The number of voting strength. Let's look at the presidential election now. The results returned.
Yes.
For the winner and for the runner-up is not up to the number of the voters registered.
Yes. What you should also look at is the demography.
So it shows the number of Nigerians that came out to vote.
Yes, look at the demography of registration. Look at the number of those who are farmers, the number of those who are civil servants, those who are students, and so on and so forth. Look at the demography and make your determination. And if you also look at the voting strength, on election day, some of us who are middle class people, some people watch Premier League on the day of the election and do some other things. Those people in the rural areas that we neglect are those who go to the polling units at 5 a.m. in the morning and stay there till they are able to cast their vote. Some of us who are within the middle class range, the moment we go to the polling unit and after 1 hour we are yet to vote, we say, oh man, let me head back and go and do some other things. So we must look at these things. These people we are talking about are entitled to vote in this country. Voting is their sovereign right. So, if we want them to vote and we believe that they don't have the gadgets to vote, it is our responsibility to make it available to them.
All right, we'll accept your argument. As we coast home,
Yes.
Commissioner, the issue of corruption. Resident electoral commissioners have been described as election wrecks in this country. Cited cases of declaring one result and not declaring the other. How is the Commission addressing criticisms of, possible complicity of INEC officials in the conduct of some elections?
Well, I've tried to explain that on election day, you hardly see INEC-based staff doing elections. That at the polling unit, you have core members and students of federal tertiary institutions. At the local, at the registration area center, you find lecturers from federal tertiary institutions as collation officers. What we do at the registration area is to provide what we call collation support, because some of the lecturers may not understand the processes and procedures. So we have somebody who will say, oh, when this happens, this is the way you do it. At the local government level, it's also the same thing. The collation officer at the local government level is a senior teaching staff in one of the federal tertiary institutions. And then the electoral officer sits by the side to explain one or two things during the collation and announcement of the scores of candidates. The same thing at the state level. The collation and returning officer may be a professor or a vice chancellor from one of the federal tertiary institutions. So the resident electoral commissioner and the electoral officers play a very minimal role in relation to the elections. Before the elections, yes, because we move the materials from the central bank to the local governments, or from the central bank to the registration areas. So when election has commenced, the resident electoral commissioner is a sitting duck, has no role to play, no function. A resident electoral commissioner cannot cancel a result from a polling unit, cannot cancel any result from a registration area, cannot cancel a state result. The resident electoral commissioner only sits there to watch what the collation and return.
But he or she also knows who the collation officers are under his watch, who the returning officers are, and by extension, who the presiding officers are.
You will be surprised. You will be surprised that for the Kogi and Bayelsa governorship elections.
What about the 2015 election?
I'm coming. You'll be surprised that it was on the Friday before the election that they knew where the collation officers and returning officers were coming from.
What about the 2015 elections?
In the 2015 elections, it was not the resident electoral commissioners that recruited the collation officers. And for presiding officers, the list of presiding officers are handed over to us by the NYSC. So, very minimal role. But I agree that if, for any reason, any of our officials is found wanting and a report is made, this commission has a track record of exercising disciplinary control over his staff and over his officers, and we won't brook any. We won't allow any of our staff who engages in one infraction or the other to get away with it. But we have to have concrete evidence. Just before and immediately after the 2019 elections, there were so many petitions against some resident electoral commissioners, but none had any concrete evidence of any wrongdoing. It was all speculation. And we suspect, we presume. This commission does not act on suspicion and presumption. If you have evidence, give us concrete evidence and we take action.
All right. That is our hope as far as, the staff of INEC is concerned. And we hope that everyone is above board. We're also optimistic about other issues where reforms are concerned. We thank you very much for your time on Fireworks today.
Thank you so much.
And that's our offering on the program today. We hope that you now have an aerial view of operations of at the Independent National Electoral Commission where elections are concerned. We urge you to join us again, same time next week when we'll bring you another incisive edition of the program. We urge you to join us again, same time next week when we'll bring you another edition of the program. On behalf of the crew, I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Bye for now.